Welcome everyone who's just joining us. Good to see you. We'll start in a few minutes when we get a few more people signed in. I'm getting a few messages from folks that are having a little bit of technology issues, so bear with me while I try to help these folks out. Give me just a second. Hello, welcome. I see more people signing on. How's everybody? Good to see your faces. We'll give just a few more minutes for folks that are still signing on.
If anyone is wondering what we're talking about today, if they didn't read all of the previous emails carefully in the chat, there's the title and description for today.
Thank you. We'll give just another minute or two. I think a few more people are trying to sign on and having trouble. Did anyone who is signed in have any trouble with the Zoom link? No? Okay, good.
I wouldn't hold Lee to this, but I mean, I didn't start any library program in the last 2 years here before at least 5 minutes after the stated program time. So
that's right. We'll give it.
In as much as I'm sitting in the library and involved with this program, it seems to qualify to me.
That's right. That's right.
This would be the time when we would be telling people how they could make a donation to the library foundation.
And the time when people would be conversing amongst themselves because they were enjoying, physical proximity.
That's right. That's right. We would probably be enjoying that if we could right now.
Lee, you gonna put that in the chat? How to donate to the library?
Thank you, Lee. That's great. Okay, well, I have 4:06, so I'll get us going here. Let's see. Okay, so we are here to do Build Back Better together. This is our arts and culture focus team. This is one of our work sessions. We've had a series of virtual meetings, and thank you for those who have joined us previously and who are joining us now. We're happy to have you here. Today we're going to talk about equity in all policies, specifically arts and culture policies, and we're talking about that in a response to both COVID-19 and the racial justice movement. So we have a lot to talk about, and I want to quickly introduce our conversation leaders that we've invited to speak with us today. First, Kendall Boyd, who will be our facilitator. Kendall is the Chief Equity Officer at Louisville Metro and is one of the chairs of the overall Build Back Better Together initiative. And if you want to say more about that in a minute, Kendall, feel free. The Arts and Culture Focus Team is one of 7 focus teams for the overall initiative. And then we have Merv Antonio with the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. Merv is the Director of Learning there. Thank you for joining us. And we have Darren Harbour, who is the founder of the Imagine Blind Players. Welcome, Merv and Darren. Thank you for being here. And our third conversation leader is Minda Reeves, commonly known as Minda Honey. Minda is a writer, founder and editor of Taunt, a new initiative I hope we'll hear about today, and also assistant professor, of creative writing program at Spalding University. Thank you for joining us today, Minda. So our topic, equity in all policies today for arts and culture sector, we'll be talking about whether you're representing or thinking about an organization, a government entity, individual artist, all of those directions. We can cover all of that today. They're all important in the overall sort of ecosystem of how we talk about the sector. To kind of center us at a beginning point, I wanted to share the Americans for the Arts definition for cultural equity. So if you'll bear with me just reading this out to get us kind of centered today. Cultural equity embodies the values, policies, and practices that ensure that all people, including but not limited to those who have been historically underrepresented based on race, ethnicity, age, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic status, geography, citizenship status, or religion, are represented in the development of arts policy, the support of artists, the nurturing of accessible, thriving venues for expression, and the fair distribution of programmatic, financial, and informational resources. And again, that comes from the Americans for the Arts. I thought that was a good place for us to start today. So in just a minute, we'll start with our conversation for today. Quickly, I'll put in a reminder that we have one more virtual meeting in our series on November 13th, same time, 4 o'clock, that will focus on public and private investment. And I think we're all pretty familiar with Zoom, but just as a reminder, please mute your microphone if you're not speaking. And if you are speaking, unmute. And please use the chat function for sharing any thoughts or comments along the way. We will save all of the input in the chat, and that's a useful tool for us. So please, during the panelists as they're speaking and as you go into the breakout groups, please use the chat function to help us know your thoughts and your input. Let's see. Okay, so I think we're about ready to start here. Just to kind of describe our process, Kendall, as our facilitator, will pose questions to our conversation leaders. We'll hear their thoughts for a few minutes, and then we'll break out into a couple of smaller groups so that everyone can talk and share their ideas, and then we'll come back and report to one another. We'll do that twice. So please, when you go out to the smaller breakout group, make sure you introduce yourselves to one another, and then we'll ask somebody to kind of report back from your group when we're finished. So with that, I will turn it over to Kendall. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about equity. First, can everybody hear me pretty good? Okay, great. When we talk about equity in government operations, it's to this point about cultural equity, which is embodying everybody, making sure that no one's left out because of their biological makeup or what they look like, where they come from, who they love, or who they worship. And so when we look into culture and arts, that's just as significant as in any other place, like public health or economics or criminal justice or any place like that. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion today. For those who were lucky enough to do the racial equity toolkit training with me, I think Sarah was on for that. Um, there's outcomes that we look for when we have these visions and stakeholders in these sort of organizations. Your outcome has to have equity intertwined with it from beginning to end. If you don't have equity intertwined with your outcomes, then you're missing the whole point. So discussions like these are what help us keep equity at the forefront and lets us be intentional about utilizing and incorporating equity into everything that we do. So with that being said, I'm going to turn to our illustrious panel here today, and I'm going to ask the first question. And if it's okay, fellas, I will let Minda answer first because I'm a gentleman. But Minda, the first question that I have for you, and this is for the rest of the panel as well, is the ongoing response to COVID-19 has exposed inequities and vulnerabilities in our community and in our society, mostly around race, but there's other groups as well. The arts and culture sector is being challenged from the absence of revenue to a painful reckoning with injustice. Together, we acknowledge there are systems of power that grant privilege to some and denies access to others. So how do we address that in these arts and culture sort of sectors? And I'll let you start off, please.
So I think that we turn to the people who are already, I got all thrown off. I'm all flustered because I just saw Miss Elmer Lucille Allen is on the call. I didn't realize we were going to be in the company of celebrities. Like, it's so good to see your face. You know, I'm so used to running into you around town at different events. So I feel like it's the first time I've seen you in so many months. But anywho, I think that the answer to that question is that there are already people within these communities doing the work with limited or no resources. So it's our responsibility to seek out those individuals who are already doing the work, who are already viewed as leaders by the different niche groups and collectives that we are purporting to serve, and give them access to the resources. Like, they've already been able to do such amazing work with little to no resources. So imagine what they can do if we give them the financing that they're so deserving of.
And do you see that as like a top-down decision, or do you just see that as a step in at every decision-making point?
I think maybe at first it's a top-down decision because institutions and organizations have to do the work to find these individuals and identify these leaders. And then at that point, I think you just give them the funding and step away and let them do what they've already proven that they're most well equipped to do. Maybe offer them any additional resources or lend them any of your institutional privilege. But I think really the responsibility is to empower and to move any sort of gates that are being kept out of their way.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to go to Darren next. Darren, I don't know if you heard the question initially. I can repeat it if you need me to.
I think I got the question, and thank you again, and I appreciate your answer just now, Mindy, as well. So in talking about COVID-19 and talking about people of various diverse backgrounds, I myself am a blind individual. I am also an Israelite. I am of color, and one thing that stood out to me the most when all this started, especially as an artist, was the different types of people between extroverts and introverts, or people that battle depression, or people that battle anxiety. And where these subcultures and how they are affected and where they go to now. A lot of the times we find isolation because our minority group doesn't have a sector to belong to. And that's why I started Imagine Blind Players, because there is so much accessibility and inclusivity, I guess, accommodations to learn when you're working with a group that may not be normally worked with at whatever capacity. So as an extrovert, COVID-19 was pretty potent to me because I like being around people, not via necessarily internet, even though that's what we're limited to now. So the idea of us as starving artists and professionals at that, this is another aspect of how once again we as artists are going to battle this new thing of separation and then funding, because so much of our funding comes from seats and audiences and such. And I agree with Mindy that at this point it's about seeing what we can provide to give people the paint to throw against the wall. Even if no one is there to see it, it still needs to be produced. I'm very much I started a new artistic endeavor as a professional wrestler. I've been training at Grindhouse Professional Wrestling. I'm the first blind person that they've had as well, and it's been nothing but inclusive. So despite COVID-19 and its many issues that it's bringing about, it is also causing us as artists to challenge ourselves to be more creative. And what else can we do and to help each other? I think sometimes as artists, we can find ourselves such soloists that we're not thinking about as a whole. We all have a common goal, even in different colors of these paints that we use and throw against the wall. I very much yearn for those moments of creativity and challenges, because as a person with a disability and coming from a impoverished background, you are always trying to find a way to get the goal that you're trying to achieve, even if there's barriers in the way. It almost becomes fun. It almost becomes an obstacle course. So with the COVID-19 obstacle course, masks and social distancing, all included, I personally welcome the idea to fund as much as we can to see where we can go, so that nobody has to feel like we have to stop, so that the introverts and extroverts feel like there's still an avenue, and others of multiple diverse backgrounds.
Great. Thank you, Darren. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the work that you do and not letting anything hold you back. So bravo to you as always. Merv, are you here?
Yes, right here.
There you are. There you are. Do you want me to repeat the question, or do you understand what the question's asking?
Yes, I believe so. See here in the chat as well. This is an interesting question. It's something that we at the center have been wrestling with as we look at the larger nonprofit sector as a whole. One of the things that we've been trying to engender in light of racial injustice and economic instability, and of course COVID, is how do we as a community address this system? So we've been trying to shed some light in terms of what the community is doing, what other people are doing to address some of these inequities. We've had a couple of interesting programs recently within the last couple weeks that I just wanted to mention, and what I've kind of learned and taken away from that, I think that could benefit from our discussion today. One is we had a couple of national leaders of philanthropy come in and talk about what they see as the state of philanthropy in the light of all this. And I think what's come to light, and it's kind of shown up in what we've been trying to accomplish as a community, is that basically where is the money going, and who gets access to that funding, right? So it's often when we because our membership is broad, we've got small grassroots organizations and we've got the larger organizations as well, and we've heard a lot, especially from the smaller grassroots organizations who work in historically disenfranchised communities, that access to funds and resources has always been a challenge. And in the community, it's always been difficult because it's not so much what you know, but who you know. And so how do we address that? How do we provide opportunities for people to not only get their message and their mission known, but how do you present in a way that allows folks to basically tell their story and let them know that what they're doing is valuable and worth funding. And the other thing that comes to mind I think is appropriate here is that we brought in Stephen Riley last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago, from the SPEED, and he did a presentation on what his organization is doing around equity. And basically, he's starting with himself and his organization. So they did an equity assessment of where they stand in terms of demographics on their staff, their volunteers. They basically did an equity audit, and they made a commitment to themselves and the board about what they want to do, and basically created a plan. I'd be happy to, I have that somewhere on my file. I'm happy to put that in the chat so y'all can take a look at it, because I think it's a terrific example of what one leader in the community, especially in the arts community, is doing to address this. Because I think it starts with there and then kind of ripples out, right? Because the SPEED, not only provides an opportunity for folks to see the work of art, but they also do a lot of outreach, right? Educational arts and ed outreach. But beyond that, what more can they do? They did a little quick data point. They did an audit in terms of like who works at the SPEED. And they were not happy, but they were pleasantly surprised that they found that maybe 20% of their staff were people of color or Black. But when they dug down the data, they realized that they were on lower level positions, like housekeeping or janitorial, or so knowing that, then the organization and leadership can make a conscious assessment about what they need to do in order to make that change. So I think you need to start there. You need to start looking at where you're at and start to sort of question all your assumptions, and then take actions. Because I think when you're thinking about and talking about changing the system, it really only takes one or two small things to potentially have a huge effect. And something about leveling up leadership, I think, can go a long way for any nonprofit, especially arts and culture.
In regards to the SPEED, I do just want to give due to the young Black woman, Breonna Harlan, who publicly called them out for their lack of equity. And that was what kind of set the ball in motion for the changes that the SPEED is making. So again, that was a grassroots effort that led to changes at the institutional level.
Great, thank you all for the information. And just for everyone's own edification in the chat, Mark indicates that he's on the board of governors at the SPEED, and he's happy with what they've done continually in pushing equity forward. So kudos to the board of governors for making that decision based on one person's actions. That speaks to the importance of equity. Sarah, I see we got about maybe 4 or 5 minutes. Can I do a quick follow-up question? Is that okay? Great, thank you. And I'll pose this to either Merv, Darren, or Minda. The common thread that I heard from all three of y'all is resource utilization and spreading of resources. So the first thing that popped in my head is when we're talking about COVID-19 and the pandemic and the challenges there, and then the challenges surrounding protests for racial justice, there's been a significant lack of resource because of the downturn of the economy, and people aren't making donations anymore, and people are having second thoughts about where to spend money. So how do we achieve equity with limited resources? And does anybody have any strategies on what we can do there?
I think the money's there. I think the money's there. When you look at how many nonprofit dollars are floating around in our community, a lot of what grassroots leaders and artists are talking about is that these different initiatives and programs are put into place, but the money never hits their pockets, and they also never see the outcome of what the money is being spent on. So I think a lot of what the issue is that this money ends up just circulating within the same groups of people. We tend, money follows money. We tend to give money to people that we're comfortable giving money to, whether or not those people are necessarily the most qualified, or the people who are most respected in those communities are the most able to kind of enact immediate change that's going to have immediate, tangible outcomes. I know that I personally, for Taunt, I've raised $20,000 since July 1st. Crowdfunding alone, the average donation is like $25. So if I can raise that much money, and it's mainly just small donors, I find it very difficult to believe that even with the impacts of COVID-19, that there aren't larger donors floating around that have budgets whose income have not been hit in the same way as someone who works in the service industry or as an hourly employee. As someone who's on faculty at Spalding, my income has not changed. So I know that there are many people who have been able to shift into this work from home life, so it hasn't affected their income, or they're independently wealthy, and so their income has not taken a hit. So the dollars are still there. It's just a matter, again, about people putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to equity.
Great, thank you. Merv or Darren, any
Yes,
follow-up
sir.
to what Mindy said?
Yes. And going even further into that, with what's going on with COVID and people's families, everybody's lives are changing in a drastic way during the pandemic, and in that, as I suppose, mess of things or mixture of things, there is money there, but now the priority of where and how the money is spent has shifted. So as artists and creative people, it's important to find out what is important to people now versus what was back then. What are they investing into? What is it gonna bring them? And it's not that anybody's thinking selfishly about their money, but you put something someplace, you want to know where you put it. And I believe that with Imagine Blind Players, when we first started doing shows, people were interested in the how are they doing this, and they're interested in the how because the encouragement of it being done is what is the investment. So in this aspect, even during a pandemic, wow, these artists are still working hard to create, to be equitable, to be inclusive, to still say and stick with the long time phrase of the show must go on. So how do we get the people to believe that not only is the show going to go on, but it's going to be great, and get them to invest into it? And once that question is answered, the money that is there will now have a purpose for its investment, even during a time where people are a little less invested because of just how drastic this change has been.
Great, thank you. I think we got maybe about one more minute. Merv, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just really quickly, I think I echo what everyone said about the money being there, but also there is there is a finite number there, and I think there's been a push around collaboration and shared resources that I think could help stretch those dollars a little further. And then the last point I want to make is around processes. So what are the processes that we the hoops that the nonprofits and arts and cultural organizations have to jump through in order to get that money? Usually with these grassroots smaller organizations, especially those working in the West or South End, they don't have the human resources to do all the work that is needed in order to get the money. So with all the stuff that's gone on COVID, one of the great things that has happened is that funders have kind of loosened their restrictions on what they report out and just basically said, use it for whatever you need. And I think that's gone a long way in helping the nonprofits remain sustainable throughout all this.
Great, great. Excellent points by everybody. Thank you, panel, for that first round robin. We're right at 15 minutes. I want to make sure that I don't upset Sarah. So I believe we're ready for the focus team highlights to go into these questions now, right?
That's right. We'll break up into groups. There'll be a couple groups that'll break out. You'll get an invitation on your screen, and one group will stay in the main session. And then I'll give you about 10 minutes. Be sure to introduce yourself to one another and continue that conversation that we started in such an exciting way. And then we'll call you back to the main room. Here we go.
All right.
Is this our group?
Yeah, we have one group staying in. I think Kendall might still be trying to switch over. There he goes. Okay.
It was like I saw it. Like it was like flip, 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 flip.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
now I lost my. Who did we lose? It's just this. What's the four of us?
Yeah, I thought we were going to have one more, but we may have lost someone. When we break out into groups, it's hard to watch where everybody goes, but
I know. Is that Darren on the phone?
that's
Yes,
Darren on the phone.
Hi, Darren. It's Kristen Boone with the Fun for the Arts. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good, good. Thank you. Hi, Cheyenne.
Hi, I'm Cheyenne Mize. I'm a music therapist, musician. Yeah.
Cheyenne, I think
Darren.
we were.
Oh, thought we were going around. Oh.
Good.
Go ahead, Darren. It's up to you.
Oh, okay. I'm Darren Harbor, founder and producer of Imagine Blind Players and Disability Inclusion Specialist. He, him, his, and Israelites of race, and glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And this is Sarah Lindgren again, arts administrator for the city. So I'm glad to be in a breakout group with you guys. Usually I don't get to do that. So thanks for letting me jump in.
Yay.
So does anybody want to kind of jump in with follow-up conversation from that first question?
So I'm sorry. I was having homeschooling issues. What was the question?
I
think Erin put it in the chat too.
Yeah, so can you see the chat, Kristen?
Yes, further background on the,
Question 1, it starts.
Oh, maybe it didn't. Anyway, it's not in my chat.
Do you want me to read it again real quick?
Sorry.
Okay, we were basically starting with a question about equity, kind of an acknowledgement of inequities in the arts and culture sector, and the fact that the inequities in many ways are caused by systems, pre-existing systems. And so the question was basically, how do we identify, address, change those systems in the moment that we're in, where we have all these challenges, whether that's absence of revenue in an organization or, this kind of painful reckoning with injustice, kind of like what was just mentioned with the seed. So basically, how do we address and change those systems that cause inequities?
I could start here. This is Cheyenne.
Great.
Yeah, I think, so I've been a part of some of these groups and also some of the community activation network conversations and talking about philanthropy and arts and culture. And I think it would be short-sighted of us to not take advantage of kind of putting all of those things together and not being all of these different things, because I feel like, right now artists need support and communities need support. And I think that the arts and culture sector can be really important in being the people on the ground that have an eye towards those inequities and are living in those neighborhoods and groups of people who are experiencing those injustices. And if they have, the funding, but also kind of the platform to be able to do more community initiatives, then you're going to get, the artists out there and people working in arts and culture are the ones that have an ear to the ground and are and an eye to it, and they're the ones kind of seeing and feeling and hearing and can put a lot of what's happening in the community on a bigger platform. And so I think it's going to take some level of philanthropic funding, and not just from the arts and culture world, but more for public health purposes and social services and these larger ideas where artists can be empowered to be not only the voices of their communities, but being able to affect larger change than they would otherwise on their own.
Yeah. Kristen, do you want to add anything?
Cheyenne said it really well, but certainly our artists are those who whose voices help us to challenge each other, to learn, to challenge status quo, to create empathy, to create connection. And I think that the arts and our artists have a really powerful and unique role in that as we move through this. And I think the challenge is, just like was pointed out about the speed, that will both come from, you know, from the grassroots, but it will also come from within institutions. And so how do we empower people wherever they sit and challenge ourselves to break that down in ways that we maybe hadn't before COVID. I think it's a really time for those conversations.
Yeah, that willingness for cross collaboration is basically what I was trying to get at with my long answer.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting point that you made, Cheyenne, about artists being sort of like the funnel, right, for a lot of those ideas that are coming into them, and then they know how to translate it back out to be the megaphone. And, you know, we think about arts experiences being a way for people to come into a difficult conversation about equity and to experience things in a way that they wouldn't without that arts experience, where it hits them on a different level or leaves them with a lasting impression, whether that's words or sounds or visual representations that, you know, really stick with them, the words of a poem that really stick with you after and make you think about things in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. I think that's really the unique power that we have right now. Darren, did you have something that you wanted to add to this smaller group conversation?
Yeah, the whole thing is a rather unique situation, and I think even in a smaller spectrum, it's going to continue to need more unique avenues to tackle all the different subsections of the situation. I don't think handling them all the same is going to necessarily probably be the best avenue, just because we as artists are diverse. So I like the idea of drawing from, like earlier I mentioned depression and anxiety, and that does go into, you know, health and wellness and what these things really do provide for people who go through things that some of us also may not. So yeah, it's definitely, you know, going to be a challenge, but, you know, but again, my major and most push is for to help everybody to be funded on a capacity. Can you guys still hear me? I have a call coming in. I'm not taking it. I just want to make sure you guys can still hear me. Awesome. But it's you know, being inclusive in a time like this, it makes it more challenging, but I like the idea of the collaboration of us all being like-minded in the aspect of what we're pushing for.
Yeah.
We have about a minute and a half, so if somebody wants to close us out.
I might I think one of the like simpler things, you know, during COVID, a lot of the funders and the kind of emergency relief grants were quick response. They were shorter, simpler grant applications. There was this willingness to be quick and responsible and like and nimble, and I think and simple. And I wonder if that's one of the things that we can take with us as we move forward, is how to simplify you know, at least the grant making side, the grant seeking side, to kind of reduce those barriers know all the reasons that those things are in place, but I just wonder if maybe that's one of the things that could be brought forward.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Cheyenne, I saw your note.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to jump off when we leave this small group. So it's really nice to be here with you all today.
Thanks for being with us for part of the time.
Yeah, of course.
All right, I'm going to close out the, sorry, timekeeper. I'm going to close out the breakout groups, and they'll all start to pop back in with us.
Okay.
We've got about
It's just raining.
A few seconds. Welcome back. Welcome back. Looks like people are deep in conversation. They're still breaking up their conversations and coming back.
Do you have like the presidential debate mute button?
Oh, I don't know if it's quite that powerful, but it's like the easy button. Remember the commercial? Yeah. Easy button.
Yeah. Miss Elmer Lucille, we were just on a call together, and here we are again.
Here comes everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, I think we have everyone. I hope everybody had a good conversation in their breakout groups and that everybody landed in their breakout room okay. Okay, I'm going to pick on breakout room 1, which was Kendall's group, and breakout room 3, which was Minda's group. So if someone from the room 1 and room 3 might give us just 1 or 2, brief takeaways from your conversation, that would be great. Can I get someone from room 1?
Hey, Sarah, this is Kendall. I had the wonderful opportunity to speak with Jeff and Shannon. They brought some great insight. Part of what they talked about were addressing these structures that we've been talking about this whole meeting, and something as simple as challenging why someone's late to an audition, or why are we going 6 days a week for theater, or improving the quality of life for our performers and our artists goes a long way in deconstructing those racist structures. Because someone may be late because they had car trouble, someone may be tired and they don't want to go 6 days a week because they've been putting in excellent work. So little nuances like that makes people think intentionally about equity and how we can incorporate equity into policies and operations. And Jeff and Shannon, if y'all want to jump in, by all means, go ahead. But that was my takeaway from that.
We just talked about the opportunity also of the COVID world really just being a unique moment to do some self-reflection during a time when we can't create public-facing work in the same way.
And I think just the idea of really listening to what our BIPOC colleagues are telling us, whether it's the We See You White American Theater document, or whether it's any other number of Black and Brown led organizations telling us about what their lived experience is, it's been really informative, I think. So listening is key.
Listening, yeah. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts from room 1? Breakout room 1? Okay. All right. I'm going to ask for room 3, which was Minda's room. If you guys could share just a couple takeaways from your conversation with the rest of us.
We really just kind of talked about how there's this spectrum of action that's, on one extreme end is panels and equity audits and everything. And then on the other extreme end are Black artists who are like, let's burn down these institutions. And so there's a lot of discomfort with, striking this match, but there's a lot of places that we could land in between that we have not explored or made any progress towards. So we just kind of were talking about what that looks like, I've really just been beating the drum on give people their money back and not clutch our pearls about how the money and wealth that we stole from a community, how that community is going to spend that money and what the outcomes of that spend will be, because it, you know, it's our money, so give it back to us. So we just kind of like talked about what that would look like, what that process would be, what the future of institutions and the communities they exist within would be.
Right. Thank you. Anybody else from room 3? Takeaways?
That was an excellent summary. Yeah, I just sort of concur that there is a history, particularly with museums, you know, where sort of, you know, where I operate, where they've been built, you know, systemically to kind of, in some ways, disadvantage, you know, artists, Black artists, and that, to Minda's point, there's kind of a responsibility to pay that back in ways now and well into the future that can help, you know, mitigate and address the problems that we're having and seeing.
Yeah. I'm just curious, a tiny follow-up question from the groups. Did everybody feel like the transition from acknowledge to address inequities? Did anybody talk specifically about that? Are we still in an acknowledgement? Do we still have a lot of work to do in acknowledgement before we get to address, or are we moving to address? Did anybody talk about that? Not really.
I can tell you, Sarah, in the equity world, I think we're past acknowledgement. Based upon the actions we've seen earlier this summer in our downtown, unfortunately, we were acknowledging there's inequity. Now it's time to do something about it, because we don't want to blow up downtown again. We don't want to close up theaters anymore. We want people to be able to get back to doing the things that they love. And so we've acknowledged it. Let's move forward.
Yeah, yeah. Kim, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say that we had a very good conversation about addressing inequities, but going in really bold ways, because a lot of we're starting quite a bit with boards and leadership and staffing, but there was some really good conversation about what if it was just mandated that you know, for programmatically, you know, that certain things would only happen for a year, whether it's an exhibition. Sorry, I've got noise in the background. But anyway, you know, and that's just more kind of public facing. Yeah. It's less about, you know, maybe the system and more about the work. So I thought that was, anyway, that was a good conversation. Appreciated it.
Thank you. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to move us on to our second round, and we'll follow this same pattern. I'll turn it over to Kendall to pose a question to our conversation leaders, and then we'll do breakout room again. Kendall, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Back to our illustrious panel, Darren, Minda, and Merv. The first question talked about, you know, how do we address systems change? The second question revolves around accountability. If we're going to make these huge systemic changes, how can we hold ourselves accountable in ensuring that these changes not only, one, occur, but two, that they produce a tangibility and tangible result? So what specific actions and policies help advance accountability? So I'll allow Merv, Darren, or Minda, whoever wants to go first, to start us off, please.
I think it can be challenging, I think, to come up with how do we measure accountability without having the communities and the demographics that we want us to hold us accountable in the room to help us come to those steps, come to that conclusion. Like, that's got to be a collaborative conversation, because what we might think might be totally different than what looks like equity to them.
Yeah, that's a challenging question, because when we look at traditionally what accountability, how we are accountable, it's usually someone over someone. And I think what we're trying to do, and I think where the opportunity lies is, how do we, one of the things that we talked about at CMP is this notion of power over versus power with. And then so how do we, as a community, hold each other accountable to ourselves, so that, because that's the only way I think personally we can move these conversations into action, and move the needle and move forward to where we want to be, is if that there are communities or groups, there are gatherings and networks such as this one that are holding each one and each group accountable, versus trying to have someone in a sort of feigned position of power to say, okay, we need you all to do this. I mean, it could possibly work, but that feels very command and control and old school, and I think that hasn't gotten us very far. I think there's probably an opportunity to do something different.
Look, I'm gonna tell you something about accountability. Accountability has so many different layers to the motivation, especially when there's a dramatic change, and within all of this, to possibly make someone feel like they're a bug under a microscope, and I'm watching you. I have to hold you accountable. You have to hold yourself accountable. I think that's going to probably not look the same across the board for multiple groups, because what one person's deadline is another person's save spot or rough draft. So we could put particular policies in place. So, well, this needs to be done by this time, and this needs to be. But realistically, everybody's handling this so differently. I think the word accountability is somewhat going to have to change along with the change, so that we can develop the motivation for the change. So yeah, it's definitely gonna be a challenge, but there has to be some sense of accountability there so that nothing's wasted. At this point, I think we don't want to feel like we're wasting anything, whether it's time or money, because who predicted a pandemic, and who knows what the future holds, even moving forward even more. So no one wants to feel like they've wasted anything, because tomorrow is not promised at any capacity.
Great, excellent answers. And Sarah, if I could do a quick follow-up. When we're talking about accountability, do you all see this as a continuum? The one and done idea, I think, is kind of out the door from what I'm hearing from everybody. If you see this on a continuum, what do you think that looks like when we're talking about holding people accountable and systems change?
I don't know if this addresses your question directly, Kendall, but the more I thought about this issue of accountability, and one thing that I think is important, especially if we sense that there's a lot of energy around certain things within the system that wants to move or make a change, that I think one of the best things that we could do is not so much be accountable. It has kind of a punitive aspect to it, but how can we support that, right? So if there is a group of folks that want to move, the way we looked at funding, for instance, or how we deal with hiring practices, what are the conditions, and how can we support that in a way that helps move that forward, whether that be resources, human or financial. What are the opportunities in there that can help support that? I know that, for instance, there's a small group of real eager young professionals who want to change the way we look at fundraising from a donor-centric model to a community-centric model. It's a kind of a national movement. We're trying to see if that can be directed here locally. So what are the conditions? What can we do as a community in our own little pockets to help support that? Because they have a lot of energy and they want to make a change. We're willing to say, hey, go for it. I mean, you have the passion, you have the commitment, and just let us know how we can support.
Thank you. Minda or Darren, any thoughts on continuity or continuum when it comes to accountability?
No, I agree. It's got to be a living, changing, ongoing process.
Great. All right. Well, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I'm assuming that our other group members are wanting to delve into this conversation. So Sarah, if we want to go ahead and break out and have our group sessions on question 2, let's go for it. It gives a little bit more time too. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead into the breakout rooms. We'll give a little bit more time to the breakout rooms so you guys can go deeper into that conversation. Or if you want to go back to the first question, that's fine too. If you had a great conversation going, feel free to go back there, wherever your conversation leads you. And please remember to put some of your thoughts into the chat. That's a helpful document for us to keep. So I'll go ahead and reopen the rooms. Here we go. Okay. Darren, are you with us?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, great. And Kristen's with us too, but she is on mute for just a moment. She says she'd be right back. So, so how do you want to break into our smaller conversation? Do you want to continue on our first question, or go back into this question about accountability?
We can probably go back into accountability. Like I said, it's a very rough question because I think everybody's, up until this point, the level of accountability we've all obtained for ourselves has been, unique to us as individuals. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a little rough. Deadlines is an easy solution.
Okay.
Meet this deadline for this, for that, for this. You work for 2 weeks, you get paid at the end of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
The difference between money for resources, money for compensation, money for pay,
Mm-hmm.
and where those deadlines, how those deadlines can line up with those different forms of received monies. Check-ins, tangible check-ins. This is where I started. This is where I am now. This is where I was last week. This is where I am now. Almost like a scheduling timeline to watch progression. But I liked what I also don't like that because there does seem to be a level of control or bug under a microscope. I don't, no one should have to feel like that because part of art is the passion that flows through you.
Right.
So it's kind of difficult to tell somebody, have your artistic juices ready by this time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, looking at it from an administrator perspective, kind of the other side of the coin from an individual artist is, that we're often talking about SMART goals and, things that are measurable and things that are, specific outcomes. And, we're talking about a challenge now that doesn't have necessarily easily definable or measurable or very specific number-based measurements when we're talking about equity and accountability. So it's like opening ourselves to a totally new way of thinking beyond the SMART goal. I mean, Kristen, how long have we all been like obsessed with having SMART goals and outcomes and all these very specific things that, the language of grants and nonprofit organizations, how do we sort of reinvent that to hold ourselves accountable? And, not that we have to be controlling one another, but, challenging one another.
I like that you said challenging one another, and you also alluded to a thought of rewards and punishments. And I think right now people are lashing out because you can feel very punished when something gets taken away from you, even if it's nobody's fault specifically, right? So maybe this concept of rewards as we progress so that people feel less controlled and more understood and rewarded through their process with said grants and funding, so that they know that they're being supported and understood. You know, there's nothing worse than somebody trying to help you with something or providing something for you, but they're not showing that they understand the process. So then you always feel like there's some misunderstanding or miscommunication.
Right.
So I like the idea of maybe grants and funding being more so a rewards system. You know, hey, help me help you. This is challenging for both of us. I do understand what you're going through. I still want to help you. And here are the rewards if this goes this way and this smoothly, even though it's challenging for you.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that Sarah, this is a little bit you were saying is that unless we have a shared understanding what inequities we're trying to correct and what that would look like what, you know, I mean, what does success look like, right? Like,
right.
Unless there's a shared vision, definition, understanding of that, it's really difficult to hold ourselves or each other accountable.
Yep.
Because Aaron's, in his mind, what he's thinking about equity and what Cheyenne and what Kristen and what Sarah and what Gretchen are, we all may have the best intentions about equity. We all may come from a place of learning and wanting to support and challenge each other and the systems. But unless we can have some way in which we can either understand we're working towards the same goal or the same vision or the same or different parts of it, even.
Right.
And this is a little bit of the uncomfortable conversations, right? Like, which is, we can't just say equity. We actually have to, at some point, name it.
Right.
A name on it somehow. Or I worry that we're going to find ourselves in these conversations a year from now, 5 years from 10 years from now, and frustrated because we, at least for this time, and things change, right? Like, I don't think that what our vision for equity now should be what it is in 10 years. But I think we kind of have to, you know, if we say, for example, if we start with board compositions, or we start with funding and funding measures, or we start like whatever it is, and we say our goal for year one is a 20% change or a 50% change, or, you know, something, then I think that individual artists and funding organizations and institutions and public agencies can see their place in that and how they can help move that forward.
I like that you said that, and I was thinking that as well, because what success looked like a year ago is not what we're talking about today. And again, going back to us as individuals, you know, whether you have a different ability or not, my advice that I've always given people is give people options. And so I want to say that here too. Maybe there is a platform, a tree grid, if you will, where yes, we have these resources for your supplies. We have funding for resources and supplies. We have funding for compensation. We have funding for miscellaneous, whatever. And maybe under each one, there are 3 options of what success looks like for that said individual, so that they can choose what they can hold themselves accountable to. So there's not just one aspect of success that everybody has to figure out how to conform to and measure up against. So if there are 3, even 5 options of, okay, I would like you all to help me fund for this, and out of the 5 options you've given me, I'm gunning for option 4. I think I can accountably achieve this goal by the end, with you all's help and resources, respectfully. That way, we're not just holding people accountable, but we're holding them accountable for what they have agreed on, and there's not just like one contractual option.
Yeah, that's interesting, Darren. Yeah.
Yeah, like I was thinking of 3 or 4 years ago, there was a big movement within cultural organizations to have a diversity statement or a cultural equity statement. And it was kind of like a vision statement, really. So it's almost like what I'm hearing you guys talk about is incremental change, but that maybe the next step of that is defining it further, whether that's for you as an individual, for your organization, or even for a specific program within your organization. What does that success look like? Because back to we've acknowledged that this challenge is so big and so hard to define, and goes in all different directions and is different for everybody. So that next step is defining it, right? Defining for yourself or your organization.
I've always hated when you go to like a McDonald's or the grocery store and they no longer have your favorite cereal because other people aren't buying that particular cereal or ordering that specific thing off the menu. Okay, it was the brownie melt from McDonald's, all right? I cried about it for years and years when they finally got rid of it. I love the brownie melt from McDonald's. But they got rid of it because it wasn't as popular. So with the options I'm talking about, with what success may look like today with the pandemic, maybe also keeping those options available, even if they're not used, so if 3 years from now, we find that people are using options 1, 3, and 5, and they're not in favor of 2 and 4, maybe still keeping 2 and 4 available for that one individual who really may benefit from that. And that will keep the percentages going up if we want to look at it like this is what we want our percent success rate to look like, whether you pick options 1 through 5. Should not matter, because the goal for us is to achieve success no matter what anybody's idea of success is or they choose at that moment. Because 3 years from now, in doing something like that, we'll have a much better idea of what works and what doesn't. But keeping the options there and available, I believe, will relieve a lot of anxiety for people who need options and need to know that this is something I can do. It's all about what we can do, and not making people feel like I don't have an option for me. I'm lost. I'm wasted away.
Kristen, do you think that also builds in options for organizations where change is going to be difficult, for them to change at different paces and at different, at the pace that is right for them? Like if it's a smaller organization with fewer people, perhaps might be able to make changes at a different pace than a larger organization with more people, or even depending on the kind of organization it is. Do you think that what Deanna is suggesting gives room for other organizations?
I do think that like we need to say the goal, like maybe it's even like, aspirational goal. Like aspirational goal is that if, equity in hiring would look like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that there is something for organizations to say that is what we're aspiring to.
Mm-hmm.
And how to and then they have there may be ways to lay out some of those aspirational best best at, to make Louisville the most equitable arts community. it would look like this. And so that we're aspiring to the same things. We just might do them in different ways. So to Darren's point, that gives all of us a way to use our different strengths and weaknesses and options, but understanding what we're, like that's what we're trying to shoot for. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And okay, so aspirational goals that, is there a better word or a better term than accountability? We've just talked about how that's a appropriate but difficult. What's maybe a better word?
I think shared, like shared accountability or shared or shared, like something around that, so that it feels like we're doing it together, not to each other.
Tangible goals.
Yeah.
What did you say, Darren?
Tangible goals.
Mm-hmm.
With an S, so that the options are there. What tangible goals can we agree upon? Perhaps because accountability is a pretty heavy word, because it's a little demanding, and we clearly we can't do that right now. Be as demanding in one sector. So.
And maybe it's almost like peer accountability or self accountability. Like, I don't know, I'm trying to think, like, how do we make ourselves accountable, but how do we make ourselves accountable to what we said we would do, but not have it sound, we don't want it to sound punitive or controlling or big brothering. We want it to sound more encouraging. So I like the word shared. How do we use it as we said aspirational, but how do we be aspirational and accountable at the same time?
Strategic accountability.
Strategic. I like that. Welcome back.
Yeah. Ultimately, we want to find a way for people to feel like it's done together.
Right.
Sector is lifting itself up together.
Right.
Not that there is some mandate that the sector that feels like it's a mandate, then it feels like that, or looks like you didn't want to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
A collective will. There is
reluctant. Yeah.
we missed it. We need an opportunity to figure out how to get there together.
Right. Exactly. Welcome back, everyone. Good to see you again. Okay, it looks like we have everybody coming back. So, okay, we have about 15 minutes left of our time together. So I'm going to try to touch on the other 3 breakout groups that we didn't hear from last time. So I'm going to call you out and just ask you to share 1 or 2 takeaways from your group, if you will. And also, please use the chat to leave us your great ideas that came up in your conversation, and share them with the group, please. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to call on breakout room 2, which was Aaron Rosenblum's group. I'm going to call on room 4, which was Merv's group. And then our group, I'll call on you guys as well. So let's start with room 2, Aaron's group. Does anybody want to give us a few takeaways, please?
Apparently, I like to talk, so I've been suggested that I give the report. A lot of what we talked about surrounded the idea of different ways of thinking about sort of all aspects of what arts institutions do and how they behave. I think I personally think we're not going back to business as usual even after the pandemic. I think it has forced people to sink or swim and think of new ways to present their art, and not just the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic combined with what I am calling the start of a second civil rights movement has forced everybody to rethink pretty much everything. And those that are nimble and can recreate or create new ways of finding artists, new ways of connecting with the community, new ways of presenting the art, are going to be the ones that survive and thrive and better support their community than the ones who just don't know how to change and adapt. And it, we started off reflecting on the idea of accountability, and I like the idea of not really using that word or the old concept of it, because I think if an organization says, okay, we're going to do 80% non-cis white performers and creators for the next 2 years, if they don't meet that goal, but they did make a good faith effort, we really need to, and I think we did need to do this anyway, but we really need to ask why and delve deeper into the overall ecosystem of the arts and say, okay, why was it so hard? Was it because you didn't know how to look for them? Was it because there's a disconnect between the arts institutions up here and the artists and the smaller community institutions down here? Was it a combination of 6 or 7 reasons? But just saying, oh, you failed, you're bad, is absolutely not, in my opinion, or in our opinion, the right way to go.
Right.
So I mean, that was a lot of what we talked about. If I probably forgot a bunch of stuff, so anybody else can add to that if they want to.
Any other room 2 input? That was a lot. Thank you. That was great. Okay, room 4, which was Merv Antonio's room. Can we hear from you?
Sure. I want to know if Lee had put some stuff in the chat. I wonder if he wanted to speak on behalf of the group.
I rarely turn down an opportunity to speak. So one of the things that we talked about was just that you can't just alter your behavior. You have to rebuild the systems. That what we're talking about is systemic racism. What we're talking about is systemic inequity. And so you have to change the system. And so for us at the library, that means we can't just shift funding this year from one line item to another. We have to rebuild how we think about how we spend money and how we make those budgetary decisions. And if we don't change the system, then in 2 or 3 years, we'll be right back to where we are now. Right. That's a really good point. Thank you, Lee. Anyone else from group 4?
Directly related to what Lee just said, in W. Kamau Bell's CNN series, he interviews 2 men and they say, the problem isn't that the system is broken. The system works fine, but it's not there to work for us.
Right. Right. It's kind of like what Minda said earlier when she said the money's there. Yeah. Okay. All right. We had a group that stayed in the main session. Darren and I were in that group. Darren, do you have anything that you want to give us takeaways from our conversation?
Am I on?
You're on.
Okay, cool. Well, we talked about accountability and how to hold whether it be a program or an individual accountable without making it sound so demanding or even out of reach of a goal. We talked about maybe calling it strategic accountability or collaborative accountability. And even with what group 4 was just touching on with various forms of discrimination and what those goals could look like to be more inclusive. We were discussing the option of having different plans of success that people can choose from so that they can see and agree to a level of accountability that they feel they can tangibly do so that success is made, because everybody's definition of success is going to be different. And even moving forward, like in group 2 was saying, 3 years from now, we can be possibly back where we started, but leaving the options on the table for various people to choose what styles of accountability they can agree to, I think would be helpful, so that the options are there, because we're all options, we're all unique. And we're going to need those in order to press forward, and eventually something will blend eventually, but not having the options there for various forms of success, I think would be not good or detriment to us, as artists of inclusion, which I guess is what we can call it now. We're artists of inclusion. And to the point earlier, someone mentioned about, the destruction that we have seen, racially, here recently. You can only poke a hornet's nest for so long before you get stung, and people are frustrated. People are expressing themselves how they feel and see fit at the moment, and it's because of lack of options. What else do you do when your voice is not heard? What else do you do when you don't have a platform to express yourself? What do you do? And what do you do is you as an individual. What does this said individual going to do when their back is against a wall, or they feel a certain level of pressure that they may not have had to deal with before in a very long time? So I'm always on the aspect of giving options, because when you don't give people options, they're going to find one and they're going to take it.
Yes. Thank you, Darren. That was very, very strong point. Thank you. Does anybody else want to leave us with any final takeaways from their small group discussion or from our overall discussion today? We have just a few minutes left, so I just want to open the floor. If anybody has any parting thoughts, we'd be happy to hear them. No? Mark, no more talking?
Hey, we would be here too long.
Okay, let's see. I think I heard from almost everybody today. Miss Elmer, do you have anything to leave us with? We didn't hear from you yet.
I did talk in my group meeting.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I did do that.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I'll just do a couple of housekeeping things. I want to remind everybody that we have another meeting scheduled on November 13th. If you're not already on that mailing list and scheduled to attend, please let me know. I'll be happy to send that to you. And we'll be talking about funding, public and private, and partnerships and everything in between.
Well, that's a bummer because it's right up my alley. But I'll pop in. But I'm having shoulder surgery on the 12th, so I might be really, really loopy, which is supposed to be fun.
Okay.
Could have some great ideas.
Yeah.
Well, I hope your surgery goes well.
Thank you.
Let's see, we'll do another survey after this meeting. So please feel free to share more thoughts that way. That is a really helpful way for us to gather information during this process. And we'll put this meeting up on the website with the others in case if you want to refer anyone to it later. And mostly I just want to say thank you to Kendall for being our facilitator today, to Minja and Merv and Darren for being our brave leaders in this conversation, which is so important and not easy for any of us. So we appreciate you leading the way today and outside of this meeting in the world every day. Thank you to each of you, and thank you to everyone for joining us for the conversation today, for being present, and it was good to see your faces on the screen and hear your voices.
Sarah, if I could also say thank you for your leadership and keeping us on time today. You rock. I want to give a special shout out to Aaron in his new endeavor. Congratulations. Best of luck to you. And even though I'm not a part of this group, I'd love to come back anytime y'all have discussions around equity. I love to share the equity toolkit with everyone and ideas around equity. So thank you for this opportunity today, and keep up the great work, everybody, and stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Aaron, we will miss you. Bon voyage. Thank you, everybody. Have a great and safe evening, and happy Halloween.
Shalom.
Thanks all. Have a good night.
Bye. Thank you, Minda.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Gretchen.
Hope to see you again soon.
I'm sure we will. Or maybe not. It is a pandemic, so.
Be safe.